understanding of what is in the strategic plan. Thank you.
And can I also welcome you, Mike, to this first meeting of the executive panel, viewing this new capacity. Croeso. Mike, we can't hear you, Mike. At the moment.
We did have similar issues this morning, Mike. You might have to leave and rejoin.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Apologies, it's the first time I've used Zoom on this computer, so I don't have this. I'm Christoph Davis, and the so thank you very much for the welcome, and thank you for being able to talk to the strategic cultural review. Podcast, I had the purpose of the report, as discussed, is to present to the members of the EP executive panel of the service and the authority an update into the independent cultural review, as the chief has already said, so I won't go into that too much. Our collective recommendations, so recommend that members note the strategic cultural improvement plan. So not everything's been looked at and get off cycle, and to endorse the next steps on the cultural journey of the service. Going back to the Kevin Davis, we go to the background. So as members will be aware, on the 5th of February 2025, the cultural report into cultural review taken by Crest Advisory was published and was presented to the executive panel. So, sorry, I just got a tablet. I'm just opening the tablet now. Is that making the sound better? That sound better? No. Apologies. I'll carry on and hope you can hear me. So since the cultural review has been undertaken, it's obviously been presented the initial Crest Advisory report to the authority on the 17th of March. And since then, the Crest Advisory themselves have made presentations to both a number of the authority members, to the service leadership team, and also has been a number of events where this has been presented to middle leaders and all employees at every level, and a number of workshops have been held to be able to capture their recommendations and comments.
Sorry, we're just delivering a headset to Mike to try and improve the sound quality.
That better? Apologies, the headphones don't work either, so I'll go back to square one. So moving on to the fifth point, following these numerous staff workshops, it was decided to appoint a cultural board as well, which has now been established and has been chaired by the chief fire officer. That cultural board continues to work closely with all the staff networks that we've already had established. The fire family staff serving project group that members will be aware of, as well as our different committees that have the stakeholders, such as the BDI committee, which will also be chaired by the chief fire officer. Moving on, the goal of the cultural board is to ensure that the process is as collaborative and inclusive as possible, which is why all those key committees are involved in having that voice to influence that, and to ensure that everyone has a voice in shaping the future of the service in a fully inclusive way in line with our strategy. So the board has now also produced the strategic cultural improvement plan, which members may see the appendices below. That's a bit more of a detailed action plan as well that sits underneath that. This plan or implementation plan, if you like, was reviewed at the last service leadership team meeting in the end of May, and there were a couple of small recommendations to it, improvement that were brought up, which are being worked on now to move forward. So, to provide information, this strategic cultural improvement plan, whilst it does acknowledge that there's been lots of progress on the journey that the service has taken, targets issues like lack of accountability and transparency among some leaders, and proposes concrete steps to foster trust, ensure fairness in recruitment and promotion, and invest in staff development. Very important things to capture that are enshrined throughout the plan, the strategy, and the actual plan to address it. The strategic culture improvement plan also aims to foster a diverse and inclusive workforce, improve health, safety and well-being, and to enhance. And it's also looking at improving the way that we deal with misconduct cases or grievance cases, to improve on existing improvements that have also already been made by our head of HR and the different departments, and to tackle and deal with any remaining obstacles. The plan acknowledges that while the culture has improved since June 2021, with the appointment of the current chief fire officer, negative behaviours among a minority of staff are still or have the potential to bring a positive change, and all of these have been identified as part of this work streams and it's addressed. The Canyon Gweithredol, key objectives, kind of pimp and Canyon Gweithredol, we're going to move out development by the objective as follows. Primary objective of the plan, as we mentioned, is to create a more transparent, accountable, diverse and supportive workplace. We've touched on that already, but the second bit is the most important, where all the recommendations are fully implemented and become business as usual. That's the long-term strategy, is that all these things are enshrined in just how we treat each other, how we speak to each other on a daily basis, and just become the norm, showing on the other areas of improvement that we look at to deliver were identified by the main report that was by test and the subsequent departmental focus group meetings and staff suggestions. So bit of a mouthful of saying that all the work has been done, and with all the different groups where they come together and have those discussions, frank and open discussions. All those things need to have been captured to feed into the final strategy and the final improvement plan. And we can evidence that as well, that it's all there and as we look at. We also need to ensure that we utilise the SMART objectives, which we're all aware of, to make sure that people are satisfied that this isn't just a report that's going to go onto a shelf and not see the light of day, but that there are realistic and time-bound and achievable actions that we look to be able to implement and to report on regularly. Part of that, we need to identify who will be responsible for implementing the plan, and a piece of work has been done on that by SLT. As to, you'll see in the strategy, if you read the appendix, that there's some broad themes, and which of those themes are owned by which either committee or which section of SLT, to ensure that that is done correctly and that the right person, the right authority, skills and experience to implement those is selected. There's a commitment as well to members that we will regularly monitor the plan at strategic level, making adjustments as part of any ongoing process, and that will be shaped into future meetings, and also that coaching is to be a part of all of the groups and committees, and enshrining that moving forward as well. So yeah, I mean, the lineup to the lights that take goal at level, can we discuss the key strategic themes, the objectives that we've just discussed. We're having reviewed the number of key strategic themes that I mentioned that are in the strategy. That's really stood out both in the narrative of the report, but also during the workshops. So it wasn't any surprise that people would discuss things that were already been highlighted, and that they wanted to ensure that their voices were heard in that way. there in the report, and I will go through them quickly. Very important, fostering accountability and building trust at the top. Ensuring recruitment, promotion and transfer are fair and transparent. There was a commitment to invest in every individual development, foster a diverse and inclusive workforce, and to improve the health and safety and well-being, and also, last but not least, to improving misconduct and grievance handling. So when any member of the public or any of the members here look at that strategy, you can see that these clear 16s are there, and all the work that's underneath those. So with the come on myself, what's the next steps? The next step hopefully is to publish the strategic cultural improvement plan. Should members be planning to do so on the authority and the service websites. And finally, to begin the implementation phase of that underpinning detailed action plan that I mentioned earlier, so that it doesn't just become something that is published and then not implemented, but that it's fully implemented, and that will provide regular progress reports against the plan to the executive panel. So is there any, at this point, would any of the members like to ask any questions on what I've just discussed?
Thank you, Mike, for the comprehensive overview of the work that's taken place today. A lot of work has been taking place, and certainly from my perspective, I think we've laid down the right foundations in terms of the plans that have been put into place, but there's a long journey ahead of us in order to deliver those implementations that have been recorded. So yes, I will throw it open to members now for comments and questions. Gareth Sandilands, diolch Gareth.
Prynawn da pawb. Good afternoon, everyone. I was reading the report with some interest, and yeah, I just want to go into the transparency in building trust as a service. I think we need to involve external organisations as well as look at ourselves internally. So I'll give you an example. For instance, Mind are championing the Blue Light Champion scheme for mental health, and there are other organisations such as the unions with their schemes. I just wanted to know if we were appearing with them, we were going to be working with them, and also what external accreditations we could get from our partnerships such as those, just to reassure that we are not just an internal looking service, but external partners are fully looked at as well. I don't know who wants to answer that.
Perhaps I could answer that.
No problem.
Yeah, I completely agree. There are so many bodies out there that we can learn from. And we have worked with Mind in the past, and I said we were trying to source independent external advice and people that can sit on the Cultural Improvement Board to be able to sort of give those as that friendly challenge and the benefit of their experience. We're currently in negotiations with someone who Welsh Government introduced us to, who has worked extensively with the Welsh Ambulance Service. But we're not yet sure whether we've got her on board. But I completely agree. Through our social partnership working with the unions, we have them involved in every aspect that we can. They were part of the working groups that looked at the Quest report and made recommendations, and similarly sit on a number of the cultural like the staff networks and the ED&I committee, because it's only through working with them can we really benefit and move forward the culture of the service. So yeah, you can be assured we are looking for external challenger partners.
Thank you, Chief. That's great to hear and great to be reassured there. As the chair said previously, this is an ongoing journey, let's say, and it will never end. It will continue and be embedded into the service long after this board is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Anthony Wren. Anthony?
Thank you. Just nothing too important. Only I've spotted a typo on page 5 of the Strategic Cultural Improvement Plan. If you go to the top paragraph, second paragraph down, Strategic Cultural Improvement Plan, below that, there's a word in bold that says policy. It should probably read policy. That's all. Thank you.
Well spotted, Anthony. I'm sure that will be corrected. Any other questions or comments? I can't see any other hands being raised. So the recommendations are that members, number 1, note the Strategic Cultural Improvement Plan, and 2, endorse the next steps on the cultural journey of the North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Can I have somebody to propose, please? Thank you, Deputy Chair. A seconder, thank you, Gareth. Will you all show that you agree, please? Great, those have been accepted. So we now go on to item number 7, which is the inspection report by the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor on the effectiveness of response to dwelling fires. And I think it's Assistant Chief Fire Officer Anthony Jones who's going to introduce the item in the first place. Over to you, Ant.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Pananda. So yes, thank you. This report presents an update following the publication of the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor Inspector for Wales's inspection report entitled Inspection of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service to consider the effectiveness of its response to domestic dwelling fires. I appreciate we have Dan on the call with us, but I'll just give you some of the background to the paper and then hand over to Dan. The Fire and Rescue National Framework 2016 includes a provision for the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales to undertake reviews and provide information and findings to Welsh ministers, fire and rescue authorities, and the Auditor General for Wales. The Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales completed thematic inspections of the operational effectiveness of South Wales and Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Services in 2024, publishing inspection reports in October 24 and January 2025, respectively. In January 2025, the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales commenced the inspection of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service by completing a desktop review of the service's firefighting and operational assurances policies, standard operating procedures, and training packages. Furthermore, the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales completed a detailed review of dwelling fire incident logs between the period of the 1st of April 2021 and the 31st of March 2023, the same time frame as the other 2 fire and rescue services. He conducted interviews with relevant officers, crews across all duty systems, and held focus groups consisting of key stakeholders. Our services report was published in May 2025 and presented a total of 6 recommendations. Each of those recommendations is time-bound. The inspections of the 3 fire and rescue services in Wales resulted in recommendations that broadly map across 3 categories, with specific details relevant to each service within. Those being the need to implement the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales' previous thematic review recommendations, the services need to review operational guidance and training programs in relation to responding to dwelling fires, and the services' operational assurance policy and processes. The recommendations presented to our service will be included in an action plan that will be considered and managed through the service's Organisational Learning Committee, chaired by Assistant Chief Fire Officer Justin Evans. The Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales made particular note that the observations made in the report are not intended and should not be taken as a criticism of North Wales firefighters, officers, or the training instructors. And the full report is attached as Appendix A to this paper. So it is recommended that members note the content of the report and note that the action plan has been put in place to consider the recommendations of the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Inspector for Wales inspection report of May 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Ant. Can I invite you, Dan, to say a bit more? Thank you very much.
Diolch, Chair. I won't speak to the background detail because ACO Jones has already very kindly done that for me. So if I just talk a little bit about the inspection methodology for you and some of the key the key issues that I've highlighted. The first thing to say is I reckon the inspection report runs to 74 pages, and I recognise that in part it is quite technical in nature, despite my best efforts to write it in layperson's terms. I've attempted to capture the substantive issues within the executive summary, which is on pages 2 to 4. The purpose of the inspection was to establish how effective the service is in its response to domestic dwelling fires. The reason I selected that incident type is because it is the highest volume life risk incident to which the service responds, and it's the one which presents the greatest risk to firefighters, trapped occupants and their homes. So as ACFO Jones has previously updated, I covered the period of 2020-21 through to 2022-23 inclusive, as that was the most current data set that was available to me at the time of the inspection. And in particular, I looked at 139 incidents, some real forensic detail. So I went line by line through the incident logs for those incidents, and where I was able to, I cross-referenced them to fire investigation reports and spoke to officers that had attended the incidents, again, if I was able to do that. The findings were consistent with that of the inspections of South and Mid and West Wales. Specifically, that a substantial number of incidents, the tactics employed by the service have placed firefighters at unnecessary risk, and that avoidable damage has been caused to properties. What I didn't say in the report, but what will likely be self-evident to you, is that if firefighters are being placed at unnecessary risk, then so too are trapped occupants. Currently, I don't make graded judgments of performance, but if I had, using the grades that are used in England by HMI CFRS, albeit not using an identical methodology, I would have assessed the performance of all three services as inadequate. The underlying reason for that is that much of the structural firefighting training delivered by the service reflects tactics which were partially introduced in the 1990s, several of which were not scientifically proven at the time, and they certainly weren't designed for use within the UK. Essentially, that was Scandinavian firefighting tactics and American ventilation tactics, neither of which designed for the UK, certainly not designed to work together. I identify in the report that the situation in North Wales is compounded by the withdrawal of legacy service operational policy and procedure orders and their replacement with aid memoirs, which was a precursor to the full implementation of national operational guidance. I can understand why officers did that, and they absolutely did it for the right reasons. But I've got to make the point here, members, that your service faces some very significant resource challenges, particularly in respect of the number of supervisory and middle manager roles you have in functional areas. And that makes it really difficult for the service to keep pace with the demands of risk-critical issues such as the implementation of national operational guidance. You're not helped by the fact that the legacy guidance itself was flawed, although that's now been addressed to an extent by the issue of updated guidance in October of last year. I make the point at paragraph 302 on page 57 in the main body of the inspection report that the size of a fire and rescue service in respect of, say, the number of stations you have, the populations you serve, that's academic in the context of operational guidance and training material development and maintenance. National operational guidance and the workload associated with its local implementation, development and maintenance is the same no matter how big or small your fire and rescue service is. So really simplistically, the demand placed on North Wales is exactly the same as the demand placed on the London Fire Brigade, which is 10 times bigger and has got 10 times more resource than you have. Essentially, the number of established station and group manager roles in your service is driven by the minimum numbers necessary to populate your operational cover rota. That is definitely not the same as the numbers required to meet the organisational workload. I make the point in the report that resourcing falls outside the scope of the inspection, but the limited managerial resources available to your chief officer is undoubtedly a challenge. Let me be very clear, that is not criticism of any of the officers. They work extremely hard, but they have multiple references, far more than you would see, say, in, for example, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, which proportionately is a lot better resourced. So your officers are trying the very best, but they have a very broad area of responsibility that they have to try to manage. Your principal officer team have been very receptive to the issues that I've highlighted around operational guidance, and to their credit, they've been very proactive in seeking to address them. And I, of course, will assist that in any way that I can. Rewriting your operational guidance is an essential step in addressing the issues that are highlighted throughout the inspection, but they are only the first step. I make the point in the report that a substantial and sustained increase in training will be required for firefighters. There is significant capacity available to you within your shift and your day crew and systems. They both date back to the 1970s, like there is a lot of latent capacity there. That is a separate issue and one that I've highlighted today in a correspondence with the Cabinet Secretary, which your chair will be aware of, and which he will no doubt bring that to the attention of the authority in due course. You have a significant opportunity to improve your training facilities through the development of a new training centre. I make the point in the report, that should be progressed as a priority. And I would urge members that you fully support your chief in her ambition to deliver the most effective structural firefighting training facilities in the UK. That is entirely achievable, and I strongly urge that you do that. The operational assurance processes in effect within the service also reflect your available resourcing, which presents a real challenge, particularly in your remote rural locations. The processes are, however, well thought out, and they serve to maximise effectiveness, which is a credit to the officers who are responsible for the function. I make 6 recommendations in total in the report. Recommendation 1 is that all previous thematic review recommendations should be fully implemented by no later than December 2025. That would deal with a lot of the foundation issues, and it would also create the capacity that you need to deliver the additional training without that impacting on your risk reduction activity. And remember, that's not just in respect of the health and safety implications for you as the employer. Okay? This is about increasing capacity as well. The second recommendation is that you should collaborate with South and Mid and West Wales to undertake a fundamental review and a rewrite of your firefighting guidance. That is something you've already started to make progress with, and again is something that I've committed to support the service with. Similarly, recommendation 3 is that in parallel with recommendation 2, a comprehensive training programme must be developed, and that should be done again in collaboration with the 2 other services. Recommendations 4, 5 and 6 are quite tactical in nature, but they're in relation to your operational assurance processes, but they're designed as fast time actions to make immediate and positive impacts for your service. Just before I conclude, Chair, I would like to just reiterate the point that the Assistant Chief made when he was speaking to the covering report. The observations made in the report are not intended, and nor should they be taken as a criticism of your firefighters, your officers, or their training instructors. The levels of engagement with all staff throughout the inspection were excellent. Your firefighters, your officers, and your training instructors are very receptive to the adoption of evidence-based tactics and enhancements to the operational assurance process. And I've got every confidence that you'll achieve what needs to be done here. I'll pause at that point, Chair, to take any questions that you or your colleagues may have.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for all the work that you've done with this report. And obviously, you've raised some very important issues that we need to consider. I can see a number of hands being raised, but just before I invite members to comment and to pose questions, can I just ask, first of all, I think I'll direct this towards you, Ant, as you introduce this item. Are you confident that we can meet all the recommendations included in this report within the time frame that's been specified? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We preempted the recommendations from Dan in relation to the previous two reports and have commenced work in those regards, as was referenced. So we started working on our changing to policies and procedures, working on an all Wales basis, working with our training teams across all Wales to work towards aligning those as well. But I think it would be fair, and as Dan highlights, that resource is a significant challenge for us. And whilst we're committed to working through the recommendations, I think my thought would be that the resource available to us to deliver that would be a concern.
Thank you. Deputy Chair first, and then over to Gareth Sandilands. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the comments, Mr. Stevens. I agree entirely with you that we should have the best training facilities that we deserve in North Wales. Do you think, and this is a personal question now, do you think that the denational or the Fire Service College being taken away from Home Office control and privatised has led to the demise of this sort of thing, and that if that was still going, we could have a national system whereby we would all be singing from the same page, if you like. But, I certainly agree that we should have the best. I know we've got to think of costs and so on and so forth. I'm a former firefighter of retired many years ago, and spent several years in training. And my colleagues always wanted the best for the Clwyd Fire Service at that time. So if we could get the best, well, let's get it. But do you think that the demise of the Fire Service College from Home Office to private has harmed the service?
If I could come back through you, Chair, I don't think it's helped, that's for sure. What I would say is that through the Fire and Rescue Service White Paper, UK government, there is a commitment to a National College of Fire. So to be clear, that is not the same thing as the Fire Service College that you and I will have spent much time at. So it isn't the same as that. It is ostensibly it would be designed to standardise policy, and therefore from that then training would then be standardised. I think there would have to be some form of actual delivery bases, whether through training delivery partners, where the training would actually be delivered from in the same way as was training courses that you and I would have attended at the Fire Service College. But ultimately, they are UK government issues, and I guess whilst we have to be cognizant of what happens in the UK, the benefit of devolution is that it is absolutely within the gift of the three Welsh services, I think, to collaborate together to develop policy, to develop training. But clearly, it is fundamental that the right sort of training facilities are available, and that's why I do commend the Chief and members for supporting the Chief in your ambitions to achieve a new training facility. And there is a real opportunity there to provide training facilities which, even in take my former service of Merseyside, where they have a new training facility, but I really think they've missed the trick with some of the training facilities that they could have had there. And you had officers, area manager Plant went out to the Netherlands earlier this year, has seen some of the training rigs that are available out there. And I do think there is this real opportunity for you to, not just in Wales, but actually to have a UK and actually a world leading training facility. And I've got every confidence that that's what you'll do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Gareth Sandilands, Gareth?
Yes, well, unfortunately, mine is all about the training centre, given the fact that I've got to be overseeing it as an authority member for the rest of us. The timescale, I think you might have been shared the timescale of our developing the training centre. Are you happy with the timescale, given that the fact that you've built in important timings on your report? Because it's going to take us a few years to develop. And my second question really is, can you get involved yourself with helping us in assisting this development of this training centre? It's so important that we get this right first time and not miss anything that your instructions have said. You're important. We address all the facts in your report. So will you be on board with us to help us develop this, and through your workings with the Welsh Government? That's brilliant. If you can answer that, that'd be fine.
Certainly, Council, again through you, Chair, if I can. So I think we recognise that any capital project takes a substantial investment in time, effort and money. And I think in respect of the time element of that, these things don't happen quickly. You know, there are a number of steps that you have to go through in order to make this a reality. So I'm absolutely cognizant of that. But you know, it is something that your officers have given a lot of thought to, and again, I have confidence that your officers are fully across this. They know what's required, and I have no doubt that it will be delivered. But it's going to take time, and that's just the reality, and we just have to be cognizant of that. In terms of there are fast time actions though that you can. And you are taking steps to address. So, for example, the work that Ant talked about in relation to developing policy, because policy being the foundation then of all your training material, that work's underway. That's really positive, and that's really necessary. And absolutely, I can give assistance, and I've already tried to give assistance in that regard. And again, that's something that I will continue to do. What I would say is that whilst I have very little skin in the game in respect of policy decisions that are made by Welsh Government, other than to give advice and to make recommendations, what I have said is that any financial support by way of capital that the Welsh Government can make available to the authority, what I've said is that there is a very strong case for you to have that training centre, and in my view, in my professional view, that would be taxpayers' money very well spent in Welsh Government by the Welsh Government if capital comes available. And indeed, there has been some capital already, albeit very small amounts relative to the overall cost of the project. But certainly, I would maintain that position that where capital funding was available, then I would absolutely be supporting you in being the recipient of that capital. I'm not sure that answers your questions fully, Councillor, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of what my position is in this respect.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, and thank you for your ongoing support.
Dan, if I could ask you a question. So you mentioned about sort of taxpayers' money there, and obviously the funding for the fire service comes that's provided by local authorities, and we're all aware of sort of the financial challenges that local authorities are facing at the moment. And I'm just trying to get my head around the report. So if I've got it right, that you're saying that the gap in terms of the service delivery that we need is in sort of the middle managers that are required to sort of deliver the strategic requirements. And when there's sort of when there's sort of savings to be made within organizations, it tends to be through a flattening out of an organizational structure as opposed to investing more in managerial roles. But what you seem to be suggesting is the opposite. Have I got that right?
Essentially, Chair, yes. So if I can give you an example, I was the Chief Fire Officer in Merseyside from 2011 through to 2018, so the period of really acute austerity. And of course, it was the reduce your managerials, reduce your management, back office, so on and so forth, and make all manner of other structural changes, the likes of which, for example, yourselves are trying to wrestle with your emergency cover review. All of that takes substantial managerial capacity and demand. As counterintuitive as it might sound, you actually need more managerial capacity to do those things effectively than less. I go back to the point that I make in the report. The number of middle managers you have is largely predicated on the minimum number that you require to populate your operational cover rota. That is not the same as the number of managers you need to oversee all of the essential corporate functions. I use the example of operational guidance and training. The same demand is placed on London Fire Brigade as there is on yourselves, yet they are 10 times bigger. So I recognise that the local authorities are suffering the same. You don't need me to rehearse that, Chair. You are all fully aware of the financial situation across the public sector. And I understand that with the levies, whilst in theory you can levy whatever you believe you need, there is a practical reality actually that means you can't do that. And that's not lost on me. I understand that. And I made the point on station visits when I was asked these questions, which clearly have nothing to do with the purpose of me being on the station visits, but I made the point to say that the chief and your principal officer team spend an inordinate amount of time engaging with local authorities to explain the reasons why that they need to maintain the levies at the levels that they do, and indeed are being very conservative actually with the levy, because you clearly you could not be described as resource rich. So in the managerial sense, you have officers who are responsible for stations, or rather you have officers, let's say, who are responsible for functions, operational guidance, let's say, but also have responsibility for stations as well. And they don't have a dedicated team of watch managers to do all of the policy work for them. They're essentially having to try and do it themselves, or to delegate the work out to people who would be doing it aside from their own day jobs. You are extremely challenged in that sense. Let me be clear, I also make the point that I'm not convinced you have sufficient whole-time resource either. That puts aside the fact that there's a lot of capacity that you're not using in the resource you've got, but that isn't the same thing as there being enough. You only have 3 shift stations. You have a large area to cover, and your retained availability issues are challenged, as you're well aware of. You tried to, certainly the chief was trying to address that through the emergency cover review. So the point I was trying to make in the report is that yes, there are fundamental challenges that you need to address. Indeed, these are legal duties that you have as employers, ultimately as the authority. But I was trying to make the point to say that your principal officer team have real challenges in doing that. because you just simply don't have a dearth of people that you can rely on to do all of the work that needs to be done. But I also recognise that it isn't simply a case of you just increasing the levies, because the political and practical realities of that I am also aware of.
Thank you for that, Dan. Very helpful. Any other questions or comments in relation to this report? I can't see any other hands being raised. Yeah, I was waiting for the chief to come in. I'm sure the chief has some comments you'd like to make. Over to you.
No, I just want to thank the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for his in-depth work in this area. As he said, we do not have the resources to even look at ourselves. So having him come in and assess where we are and being able to give you that independent view is very valuable. If I said I didn't have enough resources, you might suspect that I had a different agenda. For him to be able to assess what we are trying to deliver, and it gets no simpler every day, with the finite resources that we have, and I do recognise that we have reduced over the years the number of middle managers that we have delivering on national pieces of work, then this is a clear statement that although everybody works incredibly hard and their willingness to deliver is second to none, we need to work through what we can achieve, what's not possible to achieve, and the kind of timescales. And sadly, we cannot deliver in the sort of speed of which we would as true professionals want to deliver on, simply because of the capacity that we have. So I'd just like to make that comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Deputy Chair, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to hear the Chief saying that. I can remember many years ago when we asked for certain things in the training department. The Chief at that time says, "What are you doing? Are you empire building?" We are not empire building in North Wales, Chair. We're trying to build the best for North Wales and not empire building. Thank you, Chief, and thanks to Dan for the report.
Thank you, Paul. So can I bring to attention members the recommendations, which is that we note the contents of the report, and secondly, note that the action plan has been put in place to consider the recommendations of the Chief Fire Rescue Advisor and Inspector's inspection report. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Chris. Can you all show that you agree, please? Thank you, though. That's been passed. So we go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the performance monitoring report for last year. And I think, Ant, that you're introducing this item. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is aims to provide members with comparative data relating to the service's 5 principles of keeping our community safe for the 2024 to 2025 financial year. The report also contains commentary on activity and proposed activity associated with those principles. Members have previously raised concerns over our sickness statistics and automatic fire alarms, so I'll go through a little bit more of the detail contained within the report regarding those 2 areas. Total time lost for the service due to all sickness absence has seen a decrease in lost time across the 3 previous quarters, and also a decrease compared to Q4 during the previous year. According to the National Fire and Rescue Service Sickness Absent Report from April 2024 to December 2024, the average rate of employee absence is 9.13 working days or shifts per employee. The average rate of short-term absence within North Wales Fire and Rescue Service is 6.61 days per employee. In section 1.1 of the report, members will see a graph depicting all absence throughout the year of 24-25. During the year, short-term sickness was declining, apart from Q3, where a spike in seasonal flu/colds and viruses was observed, which was also observed nationally. In relation to long-term sickness, muscular, skeletal, mental health and failed medicals account for the majority of cases. Again, this is reflected in national statistics. Long waiting times and the physical nature of operational roles are contributory factors extending these times. Whilst the service has seen an increase in mental health cases, this is also reflected across the country, as reported by the NHS Monthly Statistic Bulletin. Adults accessing mental health support has increased from 1.1 million in July 2023 to 1.4 million in July 2024. Support continues to be provided to employees who are absent due to mental health and musculoskeletal reasons, including access to occupational health, employee assistance programme and physiotherapy treatment. Signposting to external agencies such as the Firefighters Charity, Parable and other support services is also provided to our employees. In relation to failing fitness tests and medicals, musculoskeletal and mental health are currently the main reasons. The service is working with the Firefighters Charity to schedule online workshops, and they run a series of workshops to deal with those musculoskeletal injury prevention and management, as well as resilience, with ways of managing and improving sleep and stress. Our fitness and wellbeing team are developing a mental health first aid course and researching a model for chaplaincy as an additional support for our staff. All staff who fail medicals or tests have been given one-to-one support and have rebooked their fitness assessments. And they also offer support to those who only marginally pass their fitness assessments, so they are less likely to fail in future years. In comparison to other Welsh Fire and Rescue Service, North Wales has the lowest shift days lost per person to both long and short-term absences across the duty types reported across those three services. Moving on into the report, all incidents, the service attended 6,485 incidents during the financial year, which is an increase of 9%. The number of fire incidents has increased by 8.5%, false alarms increased by 12.4%, and special service calls increased by 2.7%. The numbers of false alarm incidents continues to rise, with an increase of 12.4% compared to the last year. This total is inclusive of false alarms attending across all properties types. The service has observed a sustained increase in automatic fire alarms over recent years across all property types, and a significant proportion of these calls originate from dwellings, particularly those monitored by careline providers. This trend presents both operational and strategic challenges. While many of these calls are ultimately deemed false alarm, often triggered by cooking, smoke, equipment faults, or environmental factors such as steam, they still require a full emergency response, diverting valuable resources from other emergencies or prevention work. To address this, the service is taking a multi-pronged approach. In relation to data, we are closely monitoring trends in automatic fire alarm activations with a focus on high-frequency sources such as careline monitoring dwellings, and this includes detailed breakdowns by provider and region. In relation to partnership working, we continue to work collaboratively with careline providers to ensure only essential calls are transferred to the service. Delta Wellbeing, for example, maintains a low transfer rate despite a growing client base, demonstrating effective triage. In relation to prevention, by identifying common causes such as cooking, smoke, or faulty equipment, we are developing targeted prevention messages and interventions for those vulnerable residents. In relation to our operational efficiency, we are reviewing our response protocols, exploring opportunities to reduce unnecessary mobilisations without compromising safety. And also in relation to public training and education, we are enhancing our public awareness around common false alarm triggers and working with residents and care providers to reduce avoidable activations. We trust and hope that the above actions will demonstrate the service are working tirelessly to improve the performance and will give members the assurance that we too share their concerns raised. Lastly, it is positive to note that the number of accidental dwelling fires attending during this period have remained the same. So therefore, members are asked to note the content of the performance monitoring report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anne. Before I throw it open, if I can ask a question, I mean, it's positive to see all the safe and well checks that are taking place. I saw a report recently where there was criticism of Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, where the HMIC FRS highlighted particular concerns about fire prevention and a backlog of 7,000 home safety visits. And to quote from the report, a fatal fire review revealed that despite historic engagement, the service hadn't made a home safety visit to an individual who was on the backlog list. Months later, before a visit was made, the occupant died in a fire. Now, that's the worst case scenario, but I noticed that in the report here, it says that the completion rate for high priority safe and well checks has declined due to a combination of operational and strategic factors. Now, I see that you've put a 28-day target period in for high priority safe and well checks. What the report doesn't say is how many of those cases are you actually hitting the target with? So my question would be, what is the percentage in terms of hitting that target rate for the safe and well checks? Because obviously, if the wheel comes off, it could have tragic consequences.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to partner agency referrals, the service recognised the critical role that these agencies play in identifying vulnerable individuals who may benefit from our support. The agencies spanning public, private and voluntary sectors are uniquely positioned to observe risk factors and refer individuals for home safety interventions. Each of our referrals received is assessed and prioritised based on risk, ensuring those in greatest need receive timely and appropriate support. In late 2024, the service experienced a significant increase in the number of agency referrals, resulting in a backlog of high-risk cases that exceeded the expected timeframes for intervention. And this proposed a risk to the service and our response to our partner agency referrals. So in response, we took swift and decisive action. We reduced the number of overdue high-risk referrals. We restored referral volumes to manageable levels. We implemented a robust monitoring process where area team referral data now report quarterly to the Performance and Prevention and Protection Committee, which is chaired by our Head of Fire Safety, and we strengthened our referral quality. Recognising the need to improve the quality and appropriateness of referrals, the prevention team directly engaged with 67 partner agencies, providing clear guidance on what constitutes a high quality referral. And this initiative not only improved referral quality, but also fostered stronger relationships with our partners. So this approach has ensured that we deliver effective and risk-based prevention services while maintaining strong partnership working with our partnership agencies. In relation to percentages, we do, I don't have to hand the exact data in relation to the percentage that you requested, Chair, but I do know that we have created a performance dashboard that all of our safe and well teams and our operational crews can access to identify those other safe and well checks of the most vulnerable and prioritise them. And the need to improve our percentage completion in relation to those higher risk is high on the agenda for this coming year in relation to our prevention activities.
Thank you for that explanation, and which does provide me with some assurance. But I think what I would request, if members agree, we have sort of a target for 18 pump availability on every day, and the data we have is that we're hitting that target 100%. I think that we need similar data in relation to this because it's so important. So if we don't hit the target, okay, so be it. But let's have the percentage data month by month, so at least we've got a proper overview of what's going on here. Because as I say, the last thing we want is the wheel coming off as it did with Devon and Somerset. So I think members need that reassurance if we can sort of drill down into the data. So I would ask if that can be included as an action going forward. Deal. Gareth Sandilands, Gareth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's great to see the preventative work that North Wales Fire and Rescue do. I'm just wondering how targeted we are, particularly towards education, schools and colleges, and and groups that involve young people? And is that targeted around antisocial behaviour received within fires there, or do we just randomly pick a school? Do we target these preventative measures around educational institutions? And my second question is, it refers to a lot of Wales data with the South Wales and Mid Wales fire service. But what about UK wide? Are we missing a trick? Is Wales overall better or worse than UK performance? I would really love to see and welcome how it's reflected throughout the UK and whether we can learn lessons wider afield than just Wales. So that's regarding the quantitative data, but certainly I'd like to see how we target our preventative work more. We have limited infinite, resources. How can we target it better? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandland. So in relation to target engagement with young people, you'll see in the report and the Q4, you'll see that we have a quite an intensive programme of school visits where we go in and target and discuss fire safety and other community safety aspects with those young people. We also have our Phoenix programmes. And during the last quarter, we delivered 5 courses with 57 attendees, and those are targeted programs that work in collaboration with schools, with some of those challenging young people, to help them and point them and steer them in the right direction. And we also, through our Danger Point facility in North Wales, have fire safe sessions, and those are specifically we delivered 18 of those, and those are specifically to work with young people that are showing fire setting or those sort of early indications of potential fire setting actions or motivations. So I suppose I would like to assure you that we are certainly aware and targeting young people within those young people and working with our partners to help improve their understanding and working with them to prevent those sort of young people straying further afield. But there's all obviously that we continue to do that. That is part of our business as usual. It's a big part of our prevention strategy.
Okay, and obviously your partnership with North Wales Police, where they are referring you to certain individuals, will take a high regard in how you're targeting, I presume.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I thought so. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and can I just take this opportunity while I'm on to thank both the Chief and yourself and others for appearing at our Prestatyn Pride the other week. It really did show the North Wales Fire and Rescue at its best, and showing how culturally aware and diverse we are. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Gareth. Deputy Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to praise the Phoenix course, Chair. My wife and I have attended several, well, I will say many of the Phoenix courses with youngsters. We went to one in Holywell on Friday, and we were surprised. I think it was called the Skittles Group. And when we got there, they weren't pupils from schools. They were older teenagers, 16 to 20. And these were people who were living in temporary accommodation, who had nobody, and to be quite frank, Chair, it was brilliant to see them. The unfortunate thing was that they had nobody there to support them, only the staff. So, we do quite an awful lot of work with the Phoenix course, and I think we should be commended for it, and we should commend our team who look after the Phoenix course. But also, can I ask, Hans, would there be any opportunity of expanding the fire cadet scheme? I know there's one in is it Chirk, and one somewhere else, but is there any possibility that we could spread it throughout North Wales, or is that too ambitious?
Well, I would never want to challenge anyone's ambition, but I think we do. The cadet programs are a really valuable part of our youth experience, and we've had many examples of cadet firefighters to becoming firefighters or employees elsewhere in the organisation. They do rely on volunteers in the main to drive and steer those cadet groups. And where we have successful cadet groups at the moment, the heart of that will be those volunteers. So I don't think it's necessarily the service restricting cadet groups. It's where we find ourselves with those key individuals that will drive and desire to drive a cadet force forward. So I would imagine our aspiration is only limited by those volunteers that want to be part of that program or have benefited from that program themselves, because that's quite often the case.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any other questions or comments from members? If I could just pick up on one more thing, under the response principle, it's got the RDS station availability, and it's pleasing to note that for the last quarter, the numbers do seem to have increased slightly in terms of availability during the day. Historically, it's been 4 or 5, but in January, February, March, it's been 7, 6, and 6. However, I did become aware doing a station visit recently, and I'm not going to name the station, but there's one RDS station that hasn't been on the run for over 12 months, which is obviously of concern. What more can we do to try and get RDS stations back on the run?
So the response team have recently, at the beginning of this financial year, reorganised their structure to focus and support the areas and creating what we would call locality manager roles, which are designed to specifically focus on those areas of most challenge. I know we maintained a recruitment availability team. We have a dedicated team of watch managers that have been working tirelessly. And the fruits of their labour is, as you say, Chair, you see the improvements in our weekday performance for the past sort of quarter or so. We've seen a general growing, incremental increase in that weekday availability improvement. We still have whilst we still lose a certain number of staff every year from our on-call teams, we are actually net gaining staff. But the challenge that we always have is that if we lose a firefighter for 5 or 6 years, they take away with them skills and competencies. And of course, when we recruit new firefighters, we don't recruit them with those skills and competencies. We have to give them, and so we have that perpetual problem where we have to, losing a firefighter at one end, it can take us a couple of years to replace that firefighter with a new starter. So I would assure members that this is from a response team's point of view, and the absolute focus of those staff managing our on-call stations. It is a national issue. It is an issue that is faced across the UK Fire and Rescue Service in relation to those services that have on-call teams. It's very pleasing that 6 out of 10 fire engines across the whole country are crewed by on-call staff. So all services that actually have on-call staff recognise the importance and the need to and the value they add to their communities. But recruitment and retention is a constant challenge, but one that we are certainly working tirelessly with.
Thank you for that. And Chief, did you want to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Ant was saying about we can do all we can, but ultimately, if there are not people within our communities who want to become retained firefighters, then we can't find them. So we all know that some of our communities have become dormitory villages or indeed second home areas where there just isn't people there during the day that can provide cover. That doesn't mean that we won't try to recruit them, but I think there will be a time when we have to recognise that there just isn't the age group and the people who are willing to be on-call firefighters. And as you quite rightly said, by having these performance indicators, we very much check almost on a day-to-day basis how we are improving and are we getting better. So it does drive improved performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I don't want my comments to be misconstrued or misinterpreted. The last thing that we want is to see any of our fire stations in North Wales closed. But I suppose local authorities sometimes do have to close schools because the pupil numbers just go down and down until it's just not sustainable to keep a school open. And I suppose there might have to be a conversation at a later date, not in the immediate future, as to how long can you keep a fire station open if you haven't got any firefighters. But as I say, that is a conversation that might have to be had at a later date. Any other questions or comments from members? No, I can't see.
Chair, sorry, I think the Treasurer would like to speak.
Oh, David, ydych chi eisiau dod I fewn?
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Sorry, my raise hand functionality isn't working today for some reason, so I have to ask in the chat. Yeah, edrych ar yr adroddiad yma, dau beth sy'n taro fi, really, oedd y false alarms i ddechrau. Dwi'n cofio trafod hyn mewn cyfarfod ar draws ffinia yng Nghymru 2 flynedd yn ôl, ac oedd o'n boen ac yn llesteirio gwasanaethau yn yr 3 gwasanaeth yng Nghymru, lle. A ni'n gweld bod yr niferoedd dal wedi mynd i lefelau uwch eto. A ni'n just wyndro, dwi'n cofio Stewart Millington yn siarad adeg hynny am o fe rhaid ni ffeindio rhyw ffordd o trio dylanwadu ar hyn rwsyd, lle. Just wyndro os a rhywbeth wedi cael ei wneud ar hynny. Ac yn ail, yr wildfires. Mae'r wildfires 2004-05 ar lefel uchaf erioed. Ac o'n i'n gweld bod, o dechrau mis Gorffennaf ymlaen llynedd, nath i fwrw bob wsnos. A mae wedi bod yn llawer mwy sych eleni. Wedyn ydy'r wildfires ma'n fod yn fwrdwn mawr am ni eleni wrth symud ymlaen.
Diolch, David. Ant, do you want to come back in relation to those? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. In relation to wildfires, we do see that obviously without stating the obvious, they're very weather dependent, and of course we have had a previous couple of years where our the weather in the wildfire season, which for us runs up until the end of March for controlled burnings, has been more favourable to keep those at bay, whereas this year the weather scenarios were more challenging or less favourable in relation to supporting our support, into mitigating the number of wildfires that we had. So we did see quite an increase, and I did mention that at the last round of presentations. We did see an increase in our wildfires. But in relation to our response, we didn't find ourselves in a situation where we were stretched beyond our capacity and our ability to respond. We certainly could respond in that regard. In relation to our false alarms, forgive me, Treasurer, I'm not aware of the person you referenced that you spoke about previously, but what I can say is that we are seeing our biggest increase in our domestic dwellings, which we've reported on for a number of years now in relation to those older populations moving into properties that have care lines and core receiving centres, and that's where we're seeing the more significant increase, which is why we're targeting our partnership working in that area, with that area of focus, because we're finding that is it's in one ways you would think it's positive because it creates new vulnerable people we can engage with. But equally, it creates a response challenge for us if we're attending alarms that turn out to be false alarms. So it's how we get that prevention activity right, working with those care line providers, identifying those at-risk individuals and working with them as a preventative manner rather than it having to respond, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, if we're responding means that if we're responding to a false alarm in a domestic dwelling means we're not available then should we have an emergency that isn't a false alarm.
Diolch.
Diolch. Any other questions or comments? I can't see any hands being raised. So the recommendation is that we note the contents of the performance monitoring report. Can I have a proposer, please? Diolch, Johnny Van, seconder. Thank you, Paul. Will you show that you approve the report? Diolch yn fawr. So the next item on the agenda is the strategic risk management plan. And I think, Mike, it's back to you for this one, Mike.
Chair, with your permission, due to Mike's technical issues, I'll take the presentation just to avoid any issues with clarity. Mike's laptop seems to be playing up with him today.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Ant.
So the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update in relation to the services risk appetite statement and also an overview of the authority strategic risk register. Since the last update and following a review of internal controls by Mersey Internal Audit, several changes to how risks are recorded and managed have been implemented to strengthen these processes. The risk appetite matrix was approved by the executive panel on the 16th of December last year, and there are 8 risk types. The approved risk appetite matrix is reviewed at each one of our strategic risk committees and remains unchanged. Heads of department are responsible for identifying and managing risks that they own. However, a strategic risk committee has been added to the governance assurance structure and has met twice since we last reported. This committee is responsible, amongst other things, for reviewing those risks that are identified as being high or very high and appear on the strategic risk register. The authority strategic risk register identifies known risks that could potentially prevent the authority from achieving its planned outcomes and or delivering its core functions. We assign them risk scores and add risk mitigation to effectively manage those. Each one of these strategic risks are assigned to a committee, and a committee, the most relevant committee within our governance assurance structure, to ensure that they are continuously monitored and evaluated and found ways of mitigating and removing those risks. I and Mike met with the chair and the deputy chair last week to go through the strategic risk register, and it is presented to members within the report. So members are asked to note the strategic risk register, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ant. Any questions or comments from members? I suppose my only question, Ant, would be sort of with the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor having given us his presentation today on the response to dwelling fires, and he's obviously raised concerns, some very serious concerns. Do those need to be built into the strategic risk management register?
So, in the outcomes of the previous thematic reviews and our response to those are already part of departmental risks. The current evaluation and scoring of those don't elevate them to be a strategic risk because we feel that we have plans in place to deliver those recommendations. We are working towards delivering those recommendations. I feel it would probably be more likely that if we needed to elevate those recommendations to a strategic risk would be if we felt that we couldn't or we didn't feel we could satisfy them, because we're working well into responding to those recommendations. They are cited on risk registers, but they're not elevated to be a strategic risk that we would present to yourselves as the fire authority.
Thank you for that explanation. I can't see any hands being raised, and as has been pointed out, myself and the deputy chair did meet with Ant and Mike Plant last week to go through the strategic risk register, and we were satisfied that things are being dealt with as they should be. Can I have somebody to propose that we note the contents of the report in that case, please? Thank you, Paul. Thank you both, Paul. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, John Evan. I think we can pass that report. Diolch yn fawr pawb. So that concludes the agenda for part 1. So we now need to move to part 2 and exclude the press and the public as we go into the urgent matter that the chief wanted to raise, please. So can we have confirmation that the recording has stopped?